Hi everyone, welcome to our event. This event is brought to you by Datadog Club, which is a community of people who love data. We have weekly events, and today is one of such events. If you want to find out more about the events we have, there is a link in the description. Go there, click on it, and you'll see all the events we have in our schedule. Tomorrow, for example, we have a webinar where I will talk about a pet project of mine that I did recently about turning pictures into horror stories. This is a project I and my son did. So join if you want to listen about this project. So the link is in the description. Then do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. This way you'll stay up to date with all our streams that we have. And last but not least, we have an amazing Slack community where you can hang out with other data enthusiasts. During today's interview, you can ask any question you want. There is a pinned link in the live chat. Yeah, I can see it on my phone. So click on that link, ask your questions, and we will be covering these questions during the interview. So that's the usual intro I do. I think if you were to wake me up in the middle of the night and ask to do this intro, I would probably do this, hopefully. So if you're ready, we can start.
Yeah, sounds good. I can see that you're nearly at 60,000 subscribers, so that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, thank you. I think courses help. Okay, so let's start. This week we'll talk about many things. We'll talk about developer advocacy. We'll talk about organizing hackathons. We'll talk about Will's career, and I'm getting off the script now because we have a special guest, Will, about whose career we will talk here. And Will, you probably know Will if you took our recent data engineering course. Will is a developer advocate at Kestra, and Kestra is a workflow orchestration platform. And Will was doing, I think it was module number 2, right?
Yes.
About workflow orchestration. Previously, Will built an open source education programs to help developers to start their first contribution in open source, and he creates technical videos and documentation, and we'll also talk about his work today on this interview. Welcome, Will. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me. No, super excited to sort of dive into a little bit of some of the things you just discussed.
And the questions for today's interview are prepared by Johanna Bayer. Thanks, Johanna, as always, for your help. And at the beginning, I warned that I want to go off the script a little bit. And the first question we always ask is about the career journey. But I really like your videos. And previously, when we had office hours during the course, the data engineering course, and if you haven't checked this course, check it out, even though the course is already finishing, but you can always go and check module number 2, which was about Kestra, and the whole course too. So I really like the quality of your picture and like all the little things you have on your background and the microphone and the headset. So the question is, tell us about your setup. What do you actually have? Like, how did you manage to get such a good picture quality?
Yeah, so it's been sort of a slowly evolving setup over the years. Ever since sort of COVID, when everything went online and everyone started to go, "Oh, let me make nice setups." I was like, "That sounds quite cool." And we'll talk a little bit more about that later about how I've been doing videos in all different forms for a few years now. Um, so I decided to try and learn photography, and I got a little camera. It's just a Sony mirrorless camera, but the key thing is it has a HDMI output. So I've just got a very simple prime lens, which means the background's nice and blurry. And I have that plugged into my laptop, and it just comes up as a webcam. Nice and simple. But for those of you who are curious what makes video look good, it's not the camera, it's normally the lighting. And so I've also got a nice light here just off to the side, which lights me up nicely. Some lights behind me, which just helps to separate me from the background. And because the background behind me is at a 45-degree angle, it creates a bit of depth too, which helps to improve the quality and make it feel a little bit more professional. But the reality is I have a camera just clamped to the back of my monitor. So every time I shake my desk, the camera also shakes.
Mhm.
But it means that it's the key thing with the setup is that when I make videos for Kestra, I want there to be as little friction as possible to pressing record. So all I've got to do is turn the light on, turn the camera on, and then I'm ready to go. The camera is right above my monitor, so when I'm doing demos, it's easy just to look up at the camera and look down at what I'm doing. And there's nothing in the way. There's nothing worse than having all these different things in your desk in the way. I used to put the camera on a tripod in front of my monitor, but then I couldn't actually see the demo. So I'm constantly trying to like lean around the camera to see what I was doing. That was awful. So it's very simple, but very effective is like the premise of the setup.
And the mic, like your voice is like it captures your voice quite well. So
Yeah.
what's the mic?
So I have a Rode mic. It's an XLR microphone that's plugged into a little preamp that then just plugs into my computer. It's quite requires a lot of power, so the closer you get it to your mouth, the more sort of radio style it sounds. So I used to try and keep the microphone out of the shot, but the issue was then you lose some of that clarity, which is I hear some of the reasons people like watching the videos is the clarity of my voice. So the closer I got it, basically, the more people who are happy. So and the big sock just helps with I end up a lot of the way I say words cause little crackles and pops in the microphone, which is not nice for anyone's ears. So that helps to resolve that too, while keeping it all quite simple looking and quite clean.
I think the hardest thing, at least for me, it seems, the hardest thing is the lighting. Like,
Mm.
how did you, like, was it through experimentation that you came up with this setup that you have right now, or did you need to learn something, or how did you actually put the lights in the places where they are right now?
Yeah, it's sort of I've since COVID when I started doing this, I've lived in a few different places and I've had the same desk, but I've had like maybe less monitors or more space or whatever. So you normally think to put the microphone, sorry, the light directly behind your camera or like a ring light or something, but the issue is that sort of loses a lot of depth in your face. I learned that if you're doing photography with lighting, you want to have the light about a 45-degree angle. It creates a nice contour on your face and a little bit of shadow, which just helps to create a little bit of depth. And so luckily, my desk had a spot right next to where my microphone's clamped that's right next to my monitor. It's very cramped in this side of my desk, but it does work. And the light, I've sort of moved it a little bit left to right, but I found that this works quite well of lighting me up, but also not just completely washing me out. But I do have to make sure that I have a window next to the light too. And I used to use just natural light, but natural light's not reliable, especially in the winter when it gets dark at like 3
Are
p.m.
you in London?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you probably have even less light than we in Berlin.
Exactly. So I closed the blind, and it means now I can record videos at any time of day. But if I open the blind, that will light the background more, but then it sort of makes me more in a shadow. So it's important to make everything artificial because then it means well it just means that you know what you're going to get out of the video every time you make it. There's nothing worse than one video you record looks really good because the natural light was perfect, but then another you can tell that it's not quite right, or I'm a little bit dark because the sun started to set or whatever. So this has definitely been the most reliable setup, and yeah, I've had a bunch of this stuff now for a few years, and it works very well. I could add another light. Sometimes having two lights from different angles is good, but I like the simplicity. It's very simple, very effective. And like you say, people think it looks very sharp and good. So if people think it looks good, then I don't see a reason to change it anymore.
Yeah. And from what I heard, your hobby photography helped with your setup, with setting up things exactly as they are with lights and so on.
Yeah, exactly. I just used to think that to make photography was about buying a lens that could have a wide aperture, which creates
Is it
that
not?
blurry background. I learned very quickly that lighting actually is the main thing. The blurry background's lovely and all, but lighting actually is what makes it look good. And I learned that the hard way because I didn't have a light for ages. And the videos looked better, but it just kind of I mean, a lot of people could get away with just using a webcam and a light, and you'll notice the quality improve. So it's not all about the camera. I mean, the camera definitely helps when you've got the lighting, but the camera on its own, especially once you pump it through something like Zoom, you're probably not going to really notice the difference over a decent webcam, especially like laptops these days come with pretty good webcams built in.
Not mine. but yeah, Macs usually do.
Yeah.
As they have a Windows laptop, which is Razer, so it's quite powerful inside, but the cam is like, I don't know,
Yeah.
they decided to save some money, I guess, on the cam. Anyways, most of laptops, especially Macs, they do.
Yeah.
Anyways, we got off the script. Amazing setup. Thanks for telling us. I am kind of tempted to go deeper and ask you about like all these Lego things you have, but like we will not have time for the actual content this way. Uh, and if you're listening to a podcast and you don't see the video, maybe just go to YouTube and check the beginning to see why I asked Will about his setup because it looks very professional, and it is very professional. But yeah, back to the podcast. So usual question I always ask at the beginning is I ask the guest to tell us about their career journey. So tell us, how did you start? Like, what did you do to arrive at the point where you are right now?
Yeah, so it all started back in just before 2018 when I was deciding to go to university about what to study. Now, I'd done a bit of programming, but I wasn't 100% sold on doing that as a career. Engineering was also quite appealing to me. So I was sort of weighing my options between the two of them. But then I started getting really into programming at a school module and decided, you know what, computer science actually sounds really interesting. So I decided to go study a computer science degree. Now, it wasn't the degree that really, I mean, I just thought I was going to go through university. I would find out what niche I liked and go and become a software developer, like most people who do a computer science degree. But what I did was I started getting involved with these things called hackathons. Now, I hadn't really heard much about them, didn't really know what they were, but I really, really enjoyed them and ended up going to five in my first year and then getting involved in organizing them in my second and third year. And from that point onwards, I got involved with organizations who help run the hackathons. And in COVID, they then started to branch out and build programs to help students contribute to open source. As a result of them losing their internships, they could still get valuable experience by contributing to these large open source projects. So, what turned into what was supposed to be a 12-week contract in the summer turned into part time while I finished my degree, then into a full time job for 3 or so years. And so, yeah, that was not what I had in, when I was at university, I didn't expect to be not a programmer. I mean, it was still very much in tech, but very different angle to it. But then as I was getting, after doing this for several years, running multiple iterations of these open source programs, I still sort of had that itch for a more technical role. This role was more around helping others do technical stuff and teaching them some technical stuff, but it was very entry level. And so the word developer advocate and DevRel had been thrown around a lot. And I met people who worked in it because they often work with hackathons. And it seemed like sort of a natural, sort of the best next step. So I started to look into that and asking people I had met on my way about, well, how do I want to best go around that? And that's sort of where I bumped into Kestra. Anna and I just sort of bumped into each other on LinkedIn. Anna is our product lead at Kestra. And before I knew it, I was having a chat with them, learning a bit more about Kestra, understanding what is Kestra, because at the time that wasn't a very clear thing for them, but that was part of the reason for hiring a developer advocate was to make that clearer. And yeah, I've been doing that now actually a year as of last week, and yeah, it's been amazing to be able to continue doing the things I loved in the open source program world, but also being able to do more of that sort of working more with a technical product, doing technical demos, and teaching people how to use it.
Congratulations on your work anniversary.
Thank you.
Okay, we will definitely go into developer advocacy and I'll ask you more about that. But I'm really curious about your hackathon experience. First of all, would you recommend anyone who is doing the first year of university to do as many hackathons as possible? Or would you rather now, looking back, suggest them that they should focus on their studies?
Well, I would say the most valuable things I learned in my first year of university were at hackathons. For example, I learned how to actually use Git and how to actually deal with merge conflicts and get things merged together so they actually work, which was something that like we sort of touched on at university, but never really understood. And that's a skill that, as you can imagine, has been very, very helpful in my career. Whereas at university, your Git best practices sort of matter less. But at the hackathon where we're trying to work as a team, we're trying to get all this stuff merged together. That was something I learned very quickly because I had to. It's one of those things where to get this to work, we need to learn these things pretty quickly. I also learned how to build actual projects, which is something I noticed a lot of my peers at university struggled with too, where often they would understand the concepts, but they wouldn't necessarily know how to combine them all together to create like a full ready working program and then deploy that, which is again something that's proved very valuable, in the world of work, where at university it's not really something that's touched on. So I guess the summary is hackathons taught me a lot of those real life engineering skills that university doesn't really touch on. But saying that, wouldn't say that university was a waste of time because a lot of that theory is very useful to give you that sort of grounding that I guess a lot of these vibe coders and stuff maybe don't have these days, where they don't necessarily realize why we have all these different things and why they all fit together. Even if you don't use them, it's useful to have that context.
Okay, so hackathons were definitely useful.
Yes, 100% would
Um,
recommend.
and how did you actually start organizing them? Like you said you took part into 5 of them. First year, you learned a lot. You learned about Git. You learned about how to put the practice, how to put the theory you learn at university into practice. But how did it actually happen that you started organizing once? Because it's very different, right? Being a participant and being an organizer. Because when you're a
Mm.
participant, you learn. When you organize, you learn, but you learn other things, right? Like how to run projects, like how to run things. So the set of skills are quite different. So how did you become an organizer and what you learned from that?
Yeah, I guess like after doing 5 hackathons in my first year, I definitely felt I guess a level of burnout. Like once you've done that many, you kind of the fun sort of starts to sort of fade away a little bit. And I had knew the people who'd organized my local hackathon. I'd been in because I'd been going to so many. I had been involved, sort of got part of that circle of very core hackathon people, and they asked if I wanted to get involved. And being able to help take what helped me so much in that first year and help more people and be able to increase. I found it valuable, but there was definitely things I felt that was missing. And so to be able to come and fill those gaps was something I felt was very valuable, but also, a good opportunity to learn some new skills. And they often say as well, I guess maybe this was me thinking a bit naively they often say that the people who organize the hackathons are the ones who like get a good step up in their careers because they learn useful skills like how, working with other people, the skills beyond just programming, right? A lot of those soft skills that end up being very valuable when you're working with a team of people. Where, I mean, the stereotype is that developers don't have the best soft skills in the world. I don't think that's necessarily true, but anything you can do to work on those is definitely a win.
Mm. Yeah, right. But the set of skills again is a bit different, right? So then, yes, you can organize something, but then perhaps you're not as good as somebody who's like, I don't know, let's say we take computer science and some algorithms, right?
Mm.
If you spend time practicing them, mastering them, then you know the better, right? If you spend time organizing hackathons, you know how to organize hackathons, but you don't necessarily have this depth, I guess, technical depth. You see what I
Yeah,
mean? So when you spend time on one thing, you don't necessarily improve in the other thing. And this is so the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is something I feel myself. When I was a data scientist, I was doing a lot of hands-on stuff. Now I'm organizing courses, I'm organizing events, and I'm not technical anymore, like at least compared to the level
yeah,
I was before. And I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm missing out because like all these people, they're continuing their career as data scientists, and I'm doing a different thing, right? So, okay, I become good at teaching, but like I become worse at data science. So
yeah.
what do you think about that? Like, should I worry about these things?
Well, that was something I worried about when I was working on the MLH Fellowship, the open source program, because I felt the same way that the longer I spent working on it, the less technical I was getting. And at first, I was content with that, right? Because the value that you get from organizing something that helps people is a value that, like a feeling that you can't necessarily get from doing those hard technical roles. So for the first little while, right, it felt good, and it didn't matter to me that I was, you were still thinking about it, but you're gonna if someone asked you to do something difficult, you'd be like, I wouldn't know how to do that. I'm not the
Mhm.
best person to ask. Um, so I guess sort of the hackathon going into like hackathon organizing, right? At the time, I didn't think too much of it because because you know so little then as well. It doesn't really feel like a big deal. But
Uh-huh.
now, after doing it as a career, I definitely felt a gap, right? That there was
Mhm.
definitely something that was missing, which is part of the reason for moving to DevRel. And I mean, even to a degree, DevRel still potentially has that risk as well of some tools that you might work on are not super technical or very niche and very in a certain area, and so you might not get to necessarily touch all the skills that you want. Something that I like about Kestra is it's such a versatile product that I kind of get the opportunity to touch everything rather than just one very specific area of tech. Um, but yeah, I think it's a difficult balance, and you've got to figure out what do you value more? Do you care about being super technical, or do you care about helping others become super technical? It's
Mhm. Yeah.
depends on what matters most to you.
I guess also developer advocacy is a good blend of both technical and non-technical work. Because then you can see, okay, like I enjoy doing technical stuff more, and then you can slowly move to that direction, right? So you can say, okay, now I don't know if it applies to your particular case or if you ever thought about this, but let's say at Kestra, you could start contributing more to the internal product rather than, working on documentation. I don't know if it's possible, but perhaps. Or you say, yeah, I enjoy the non-technical work more, and then maybe you um, do the community stuff like talk to the user, collect feedback, and things like that, right? So I think it's a very nice blend of both technical and non-technical work.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the sort of the beauty of Kestra being such a small company is that every month's a bit different. The issue with the open source program was we ran three a year, and so it was very routinely of we do this program for 12 weeks, there's a gap in between, and then we do it again, and it just felt very repetitive. And some people loved that sort of thing, whereas and I liked it at first when the economy was doing well and companies wanted to spend money on these initiatives. We were, bringing up new courses. We did a production engineering one, so like DevOps style course. We did a Web3 course. So it was cool to like branch into these different things, right? But the thing that I like about Kestra is that I'm not like necessarily just writing documentation every month. Like we did the Zoom camp in January, right? And that was very different to what I was doing in March, for example. And uh, I guess that's sort of I guess if I worked at a bigger company with DevRel and there's a big team of developer advocates, you'd maybe be a little bit more you'd have your specialized area. But the variety, I guess, is allows you like if I would prefer to do some more technical stuff, then I can sort of dive down that route. If I want to do more community orientated, I can do that. It's sort of a nice blend of the two, and I can sort of, like you say, lean into one or the other as I like.
And I still see you help our course participants. So I still see your user picture in our Slack. So amazing. Thanks a lot for doing that. But I want to go back a little bit again to hackathons.
Hmm.
So let's say I want to organize a hackathon. And this is actually not a hypothetical question because we actually want to organize a hackathon in Data Talks Lab. So let's talk hypothetically. I want to organize a hackathon. How do you actually do this? Like, what are the things I should consider? What are the moving parts? Like, how to come up with ideas? So,
Yeah,
no, I want to organize one, but like, what to do? I have no idea.
yeah. Hackathon sort of it's kind of got a few key parts to it, I guess. The first part is the building part, right? The actually building your project. The other key part is the demoing and uh sort of presentation part. Now, typically, the way that the hackathons I ran as a student were there would be 24 hours, one overnight, and you would either demo it on stage and everyone would do a demo on stage, or there'd be sort of a science fair style thing where you'd set up a bunch of tables and judges would walk around to those. So the key things you've got to think about for that is, and if you're doing it online, it's like 10 times easier because you haven't got to find a venue and you haven't got to like do catering and all that kind of stuff. And I did a lot more of the online stuff because I did a few in 2019 and then obviously pandemic came around. The online ones, the key thing is having a good community place to do the hackathon. You've got the Slack, so that makes that very easy, but places like Discord are a great place for it. Um, we used to think back in the day doing lots of like online workshops during the hackathon was a good idea, but in the world of online, there's so many of those sort of resources out there that it doesn't really get very good engagement. And actually, focusing on just being helpful in Slack and stuff is, and like hosting office hours where people can come and discuss their ideas is more useful. Um, and then you get onto the Sunday and you've got the normally doing it over a weekend, you've got the judging part. And that's actually the most difficult part to organize of a hackathon, especially the online ones, because you can either, there's two ways. You either organize the judging and figure out the winners at the same time of the event. So you do it all pretty much in real time, and that can be stressful. Or you say, we'll announce the winner later in the week. But then you sort of lose engagement there because people might then just, go back to their normal lives, forget, miss it, right? So it's difficult. And judging wise, there's a few matrices online you can use for different categories you should judge it on, how you can weight all the different judges' scores so that you can get a fairly fair result. And then if you get any sort of drawing points, then you can sort of discuss. Now, the thing I used to really like about hackathons was having categories. Normally, hackathons are pretty open-ended, but if you can get sponsors involved with the hackathons, having a hackathon project that is best use of the sponsor technology was actually one of the ways I found enjoyment at hackathons because I turn up and I go, I don't really know what to build. Let me have a look what sponsors are here and try doing something with their tool. I get to learn something new. Maybe it'll be useful this weekend, but there's a chance I could win some cool prize at the end of it too. And I ended up doing all sorts of really cool projects that won prizes because I knew that I'm going to build with this tool. Now I've got to think of an idea that best uses this tool and will catch attention. And I quite enjoyed that. Whereas the open-ended prize can often be quite overwhelming because you go, what would I possibly use? Like, what could I do? Right? There's so many things. And the thing that people often get wrong at hackathons is they think, I'm going to build the next Facebook. And then they forget that Facebook was not built in 24 hours. And they get to, 2 hours before submissions close and they go, oh, I have a project here that like has a login page and that's it. And the login page doesn't actually work. And they go, well, that was a waste of time.
And but one thing you mentioned that was, I think it was about when you were a participant. So you saw what sponsors are there, what kind of tools they have, and then from that you thought, what can I actually do with these tools? To me, it sounded like the problems were open-ended, or like the hackathon was about just, hey, do something cool here, like the things you might use. You have like the weekend, go. Was it like that, or was there some theme like you would get some directions, like, okay, we're working on, I don't know, some specific area where you want to do things? Because for
Usually
me,
it was,
it's also a
sorry.
problem, like how to actually,
Mm.
okay, like there are some people who want to do something, but like, mm, if I just give them um, no constraints at all, they will not do anything
Yeah.
because they will just run, think, okay, what should I do? And then the time is over. So
Yeah.
like how to deal with this problem?
Yeah, the open-endedness works quite well for in-person events because when someone's committed to turn up, right, they'll normally stick around. And if there's free food, right, there's the incentive to hang around. But the
Right.
online hackathons, right, it's hard to keep that engagement up because they can just switch off at any point. And if it's not going well or they feel like they haven't made much progress, they'll just give up because there's no consequence to giving up or there's no downside. It's not like they have to then travel home or whatever. So the category, so some of the events I've seen would have categories like best use of data or AI or something quite broad, but still like it gives you a focus, but it's still broad enough that you can use your creativity. Um, but then others would be maybe just completely open-ended, and then you could use the sponsor tools. One of the prizes I won was for Hackiest Hack. We didn't intentionally go for that prize, but the project we built was so barely held together that people were like, "Yeah, this is the most hacked up thing I've ever seen. It's a miracle that it works." And like, if you look at it wrong, it will
What
just
was
stop
that?
working. It
What
was
was that?
called Willmojis, which was basically we thought it'd be really cool to use this Microsoft Vision API to take if you sent it a photo, it could tell you the emotions of the photo, and then as a result, we could then use a thing to cut out my face from that photo and then turn it into an actual true type font that you can install on your phone or your laptop. And then when you type the laughing emoji, it would actually be my face, not just an image that we pasted in, an actual emoji. In the same way that you have different emojis between like an iPhone and an Android, you could have a will emoji if you wanted. And so we took a load of photos, figured out the emotions, upload, cut the
Amazing.
face out, and then installed it as a font. But the thing is, all of those different stages barely worked together. And like when we actually ran the demo, where we had the emojis you could type in, like it was pretty buggy. It didn't really work, but people were like, the fact that this sort of works is just wild. The fact that you thought of this as an idea is kind of crazy.
Yeah, this is the most wild thing. Like, how did it even occur to you to do this particular thing? Because, like, I don't know, it's so random.
It is very random. I remember that Microsoft was sponsoring the hackathon, and they
Yeah.
said like best use of Microsoft would Microsoft Azure will win like a Surface Go, and we were like, wow, that's really cool. So let's have a look at Microsoft. Let's see what Azure has on offer. And we were like, at this point, we'd done quite a few hackathons, so we were like, we knew we kind of had a formula for what won a hackathon, which was basically a project that had a very clear scope. It was very it did a thing, it processed the thing, and you got a result. That was it. It didn't do anything more. It wasn't that complex. It just did the thing very, very well. And we were like, it'd be pretty cool if we could do something with image recognition. And then a friend of mine was like, oh, I've been reading about true type fonts recently and like how you can create them. I wonder if we could like use this like there's this like library on Linux that lets you like create fonts. I wonder if we can like integrate with that to effectively generate fonts in real time. And so basically all of us had these weird ideas and we were like, I guess we could stick them all together and create something that works. I mean, it's one of those ones that it was one of those ideas that was gradually evolving as the hackathon went on. And every time we did this at Oxford University. So there was a lot of like prestige there, people trying to build really useful and impactful projects. And we're there being silly with this project. And every time we talked to them, they were just like, that's just so silly. That's never going to work. And then we demoed it and everyone was like, okay, we take it back. We take it back. We just thought you were messing around. We didn't realize you'd actually build it.
Yeah, but it was still messing around, right? At the end,
Oh yeah, of course.
it was, but the point is to have fun, right? Like not so necessarily have social impact at the end.
Exactly. The issue is at a hackathon, it's such a short space of time that to actually have impact is very hard. And so the best thing to do, especially as a student, right, is to focus on learning new things. And in our case, it was, well, we this person wants to learn about true type fonts, this person wants to learn about Microsoft Azure. So we all came out of it, feeling good because we had a chance to play around with some new tools, which we wouldn't have necessarily previously done. So worked quite well.
Was there another Will in the team, or Will Moji is Will is you?
It was me, yeah. There's people who like saw me getting lots of photos taken of myself against a white wall so that we could then they were like, why is he just pulling all these different expressions? We were like looking at the emojis list, trying to figure out what facial expressions I needed to pull.
Cool. Okay, let's talk about MLH. So MLH is Major League Hacking, or what is that?
Yeah, Major League Hacking. So
What is it?
So MLH started about 12 years ago as an organization to help students run hackathons. Like you were asking earlier, right? Hackathons can be quite complex. There's lots of moving parts. And how do students, especially if your university doesn't have a hackathon, learn how to build them? So the idea was MLH would provide like pre-event support and they would also send a representative to the event. And I became friends with a lot of these representatives because there weren't that many in the UK. So I often ended up bumping into the same people at different hackathons. And they were like, oh, you would, especially once I started organizing hackathons, they were like, you would be great at this. Like, you should totally apply to become one of the representatives. And come along to these hackathons. And I thought, yeah, that sounds cool. I get the opportunity to go and help more people, but at this time, the travel and stuff would get paid for, and I wouldn't have to fork out the very little money I had as a student to continue going to these events. So it seemed like a win-win situation to me. Now, I applied for the role at the sort of start of 2020 when we were full swing of volunteering at different hackathons, and I was a judge at a lot of them in the UK, helping as apparently I had a good idea of what was a winning project or not. And I interviewed with them and they were really impressed. But then I was due to have my final interview just as the pandemic started. And so MLH was in sort of shutdown mode of figuring out, well, our whole business model revolves around running events in person, but that's not happening anymore. So I guess we've got to figure out how to do online events now. And then after they sort of figured that out, I finally got my final interview. I got offered the job, but sadly, there wasn't anything for me to do because they wanted to train me before I could do any events, but they hadn't figured out how to do online training. So they were like, we're just too busy right now. So I was basically just sat there like waiting for anything to come up. And then I noticed that MLH had just launched this new program called the MLH Fellowship. And the idea was that the MLH Fellowship was to sort of, a lot of students had lost internships, me included. And they thought, wouldn't it be great if we partnered up with these organizations who have a lot of open source projects, like Meta's a good example, where they've got tons of them, like React, they've got all the FAIR projects, and so on and so on. They could come and sponsor some of these fellows. We'll basically run the program, we'll mentor them, we'll give them the structure they need and support they need to then be able to contribute to them so that these projects would get some good open source contributions that were actually useful. And these students would learn how to contribute to a repository that was bigger than their like two Python file project, right? They were like, whoa, I've actually learned how to work on a big project. And then they can put that on their CV or resume, right? And say, I contributed to React and I actually built something useful, not just like a typo I found. Um, so they were looking for people to come and do interviews, to just like vet these students to make sure that they, just basic things. And I was like, I literally have nothing to do. My university exams have been cancelled. Sign me up. I just want to be involved, and this sounds really cool. And I got really involved in it. I got invited to help out with some of the technical interviews because I effectively had lots of free time. And they were like, we haven't actually figured out how to really run this program. The classic 2020 problem of everything's happening so quickly, we don't know what's going on. So I was like, yeah. They were like, would you like to come and help out for the summer, work alongside the CEO, just figure this out? And I was like, I literally have nothing better to do. This sounds great. And what turned into what I thought was just a summer internship thing. Pandemic would end. I'd go back to university. I'd go do some of these hackathons in person. Happy days. Ended up turning into a part-time job for another 8 months, helping to continue because we only thought we were running one of these programs. It was never sort of the plan to run this continuously. And when the thought was, why don't we do this again? I was like, yeah, let's do it. I'd love to be involved. So we did some more. I got involved, and then I went full time in the summer of 2021 and worked there for 3 or so years. So yeah, MLH traditionally a hackathon company, but branched out into, I guess it's more like a developer education company, right? About early stage students who are wanting to become developers, right? And hackathons are a great way for them to learn those things, but the fellowship sort of provided the next step, right? Of like, now you've done a weekend event, now you could get an internship with us and we'll teach you valuable skills to help you, get a job at your dream company.
So the idea was that there were students who were motivated, who wanted to do something with their time, who didn't necessarily have any guidance, or they basically had time and wanted to put this into learning something, into building something.
Exactly.
And what you
Exactly.
did is you had a bunch of open source projects, perhaps from your sponsors. And so what you did is you mentored them how to exactly go about finding what to work on, right? How to open pull requests, things like that. Am I right?
Yeah, exactly. So we work with the maintainers of these projects who would give us sort of a list of good first issues and sort of the things that they would find valuable. And then we would help the students. understand like pull request efficacy, right? Making sure that they were writing clean code, making sure that generally that they weren't just making work for the maintainers. That was the main goal, right? Was we didn't want these maintainers to be like, great, I've received these pull requests that are full of rubbish, and I'm gonna have to comb through. It's gonna be twice as much work for me to make these good than me just doing it myself. So we'd often teach people like get best practices, but also just like working in a collaborative setting, right? How to work with other people. Because a lot of these people, and we learned this quite quickly, were that they had never really worked in a Git repository beyond just themselves. They were really good developers, some of them, especially that like it was very difficult to pick the 100 people we had in that first cohort. But a lot of them were, really, really good at certain things. Like some of them really good at data in Python or like really good at React. And so when it came to projects that would match their specialties, they could write it really well. They just didn't know how to write it in the bigger context, right? And some of them would find like, how do I know how to go through an open source project? I'm so overwhelmed. Where do I even start? I can't read all the code. It's like, don't try and read every part of React. Like you're going to be there all year. It's a massive repository. Instead, you just need to focus on the bit that you're actually contributing to. And we can start with a small issue, right? Gradually they'd work on multiple issues over the 12 weeks. It's like we'll gradually ramp them up. So by the end, you've actually worked on a fairly substantial issue. But to begin with, you were just working on a small little bug fix, and you're getting yourself set up. I guess that's another thing that people struggled with as well was the how do I set up a development environment for these projects? I've only ever just used like one simple Git repository and a, Python virtual environment. Some of these projects have got very complex environment setups that require multiple stages. It was just like getting their heads around some of that too.
How did you know yourself, you as a MLH, these things? Because for some projects, getting the end setup, the environment setup, the development environment is not a trivial thing. Like I remember trying to prepare the environment for TensorFlow, and like it's impossible, like unless you work at Google. Like they have all these tools, the Bazel, like there are the usual tools like CMake. Everything is written in C++, of course, and then there
Yep.
are like Bazel, and like at the end I just gave up. I thought, nah, like do your things yourself, because like and I think I was an experienced developer, right?
Yeah.
So I worked as like a senior data scientist. I knew a thing or two. Um, how did you know these things? Like, in order to help the students, you needed to know these things yourself. Did you work closely with maintainers to learn these things yourself first, or how did you do this?
Yeah, so the way it was set up was the students were in small groups called pods, so about 10 students. And in the first cohort, they all had a team leader who was effectively a senior engineer doing this as like an evening part-time thing, right, as a mentor. We previously then transitioned that model to be like student led. So, like previous students of the program would run those groups and we'd have like a sort of group of mentors. But what we found was basically we would work with the maintainers before the project started to get all of this information, right? Of understanding like how to get the project set up. And effectively, they would show us how to do it. So we could then turn that into something that we could then do for multiple, for the whole group of students. Or maybe we'd have the maintainer come and do like a workshop with all the students and they would follow along and then we'd have our team to go and help them. Some projects, like you say, straightforward, not too much hassle. Some projects were pretty painful, but the maintainers were normally fairly forgiving because they knew that their project was a massive pain, even for them. So they were normally fairly like happy to help out a little more than some people. But some projects will, yeah, we normally would try and work for when as the program evolved, we would try and target projects that, because the issue is students don't always have the best computers either. And so we found, especially in the later years, working with some of the AI projects, we'd have to, they wouldn't have enough memory and stuff to like, or any GPU power to run any of the models, and their computers would just completely die. So we'd have to like give them VMs on the cloud, or a lot of them were using like Google Colab to be able to do some of it. But yeah, it was the data projects were always the hardest to work with, mainly because of the computer power that they just didn't have. So it was frustrating, but we would often find ways of like giving them cloud resources or Google Colab to sort of get around some of that. Um, but yeah, as the projects basically as time went on and we realized that some of these projects were really difficult to set up, we would try and not work on them. Meta's a good example because they've got so many projects. We'd just be like, that's not a good fit for us. Can you switch to another one? And it's like not a big deal. But some companies, like we used to work with one company that wanted us to contribute to Apache Airflow, and because they used it a lot internally, and yeah, that was a very much a case of it's Apache Airflow or nothing. Like we want Apache Airflow because they were effectively having the students contribute some like specific things they wanted that were open issues. It's just no one had contributed them. And the maintainer was like, yeah, this is super chill with me because I'm getting contributions without having to actually do anything. Um, but yeah, so it's sort of difficult to find the balance there.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, like what you were talking about, not having enough computers, like having computers that are not powerful enough. Like it gave me a sort of PTSD of me. I remember when I was trying to compile TensorFlow. So like my computer wouldn't be able to just compile a thing, like let alone running the model. Like I wouldn't just be able to have the package like from the source code.
Yeah.
That was so complicated. Like I had to run the machine on AWS with I don't know 64 gigs or was it
Yeah.
32? But like some just to compile the
Ridiculous
thing,
amount.
just to compile the thing like that, I didn't need to run anything. Yeah. Is this thing still like this program fellowship? Uh, is it still running?
Yeah, it still runs. So I haven't been involved in it now since 2023, but it's still running. It runs 3 times a year. It's a little bit more of a, before I left, I sort of helped to tighten it up into a bit more of a repeatable program. It hasn't really expanded, mostly due to the economic shift of companies that were maybe having had allocated funds to be able to support open source projects. A lot of those sort of budgets got cut, which is a shame because it was such a cool initiative. But I have heard that hopefully some with the boom in AI, there might be some more sort of programs that are orientated around AI, which will be really exciting to see. It's still nice to see, like on LinkedIn, students who've been through part of the program posting about how they've finished the 12 weeks, they contributed to like Airflow, for example, and we actually, I think, was it? It was. We used to work with the Palettes project, so like Flask and Ginger and so on. And some of those students ended up becoming maintainers of the project. And so we'd end up working with those students in future programs. And it was just really cool to see the fact that we weren't just building open source contributors, we were turning people into maintainers as well because of how much like they didn't realize how powerful open source was. But once they got involved in it, they were like, I loved it. This is awesome. How do I turn this into a career? But that's never something we really imagined when we started.
They have to be a student to take part because I know in Google Summer of Code, I think the concept is kind of similar to
Yeah.
what you do with this MLH fellowship. I think they changed with Google Summer of Code, but it used to be you had to be a student to take part in Google
Right.
Summer of Code. And I tried when I was a student. It was a lot of time ago. My idea was not accepted, so I couldn't take part. And then the next year, the next summer, I'm not a student anymore. And like,
Right.
okay, like I would have participated, but I couldn't. Um, like, is it the thing for MLH fellowship? Do you have to be a student too?
Yeah, so previously we used to make it so that you were a student. It's worth noting that most of MLH's community and like audience is students based on the hackathons, which are student only. But the fellowship we did eventually open it up to be anyone. So we've had a few people who decided they were working some random job and they wanted to have a career change. They'd been learning, let's say, Python part-time. They felt fairly comfortable with Python and they were able to pass like our technical screen, which is pretty straightforward, but we can't teach you to code. You need to be able to have a rough understanding of programming. We're teaching you how to contribute to an open source project, not teaching you basic fundamentals of Python, right? But yeah, we've had a few people who've like gone and they maybe did it part time, so it was a little bit more challenging for them. But they were often the most motivated, right? Those career changes, the people who were like, I really want to start a career in tech, and this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I don't want to mess it up. And so it was good to see like to see that. We didn't see those sort of people very often, but when we did, they were often like some of the best students we ever saw.
And I realized that we're actually coming to an end, and which is sad because, like, I really wanted to talk about. We talk a lot about different things. We also touched this topic of developer advocacy, but let's maybe spend last 10 minutes talking about that. Like,
Hmm.
what do you do as a dev advocate? What are your main responsibilities?
Yeah, so we actually recently hired a technical writer, so that has made my life a little bit easier. But basically, my role was involved in is sort of evolved in everything to do with teaching our users about Kestra. The issue with workflow orchestration, especially with a tool like Kestra, is that there's so many different ways you can use it and for so many different use cases. And because it's a very complex tool, if you don't understand it, people aren't going to use it. So what my role started in was just simply improving our documentation and creating videos to teach people how to actually use the tool and what it's for. That's worked really well so far. Now we've got a technical writer called AJ. Big shout out to AJ. That's made my life a bit easier. Also, AJ is way better at writing documentation than me, so that's also a big win for Kestra. But now it means I can focus a bit more on the videos and the sort of education side, right, of teaching people. And so my focus this year is now I've taught people the fundamentals of Kestra. I'm now going to teach people how they can take stereotypical use cases of workflow orchestration, right, and how they can do that in Kestra. As well as just also talking about tools that work with Kestra, like Postgres, for example, and teaching people about cool things to do with Postgres and showcasing how Kestra might be a cool way of doing what you're doing with Postgres. So yeah, it's sort of turned into a very much outreachy education sort of role for me.
It's pretty cool, I think. Because I kind of do similar thing. It just doesn't focus on one specific tool,
Mm.
but I think what you do is really cool. I'm just wondering. So for some people who need to create content, especially videos, for them it's simpler to first create a text, a script, and then create a video from that script. Or for some people, like for example me, I just go with the video directly because for me writing is more difficult. Which of these categories, like which of them are you?
I definitely lean more into the same category as you. I make very rough bullet points on what I'm trying to achieve. I'll get a working demo and then I just press record and just roughly follow my bullet points. I have been known to write blog posts and or other people have written blog posts and I then turn those into videos. While those can come out very well, they are often hard work because I it's a bit too rigid for my style. I find I'm like, oh, it feels very unnatural for me to try and follow a script.
And now with the tech writer in your team, what you can do is do your think, do a bunch of bullet points, make a video, and then the tech writer will help you actually turn this into written content, into a piece of written content, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we just had a release last week, and so we were sort of tag teaming, trying to figure out how some of the new features worked, so that he could write the page and the documentation, and I could make a video to showcase how it worked. Um, Sometimes, like you say, he would make the video, or he'd make the documentation page, and I could then use that as a basis, or we'd sort of. I'd help create like a list of bullet points about the documentation page. He could then actually flesh that out into something useful. But we had the same sort of, shared bullet points of what are we trying to achieve here, and then we'd sort of. It's almost good that the video doesn't completely follow the documentation page, right? Because otherwise, it's a bit boring, a bit dry. It's good that the video sort of gives you something else, right? That the documentation doesn't. They both have a
Makes
purpose,
sense.
right?
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Uh, do you have a good recipe for making a good video?
Yeah. So the key thing is, right, like it's got to be a key goal. What is the goal of the video, right? Like, what are you trying to achieve? Is the video to showcase a certain feature of Kestra? Is the video to teach people about a new tool? Like, what is the goal of the video? Otherwise, it's very easy to make the video really long or go off in tangents, and then you sort of sit back and go, what is the point of this? Like, if I don't understand what the goal is from the beginning, then how is a user going to
That's
understand?
prep work, right? So you open Google document or some sort of text document where you put these things, right? Okay, the key goal for this video is I want to teach this. Like, I saw your post about a new release of Kestra, right? So there were some features, and now let's say you need to make a video about one of these features. What was one of these features? Can you tell us?
Yeah, one of the features was a new workflow component called after execution. So my main thing was why did we add this, right? What is the goal of after execution? And so I can tell users why they would use this because on its own, it's just a thing that runs once an execution's finished. But why is that useful, right? Like I don't I don't care. It's useful because you can then use it to send notifications with the actual status of the workflow, right? If the workflow failed, it will actually say failed. Whereas if it runs during the workflow, it will say it's still running. So that's the goal of it. But yeah, it's like you got to put myself into the user's shoes and go, why is this useful to them? And then I can involve my examples around the goal, right? Because I could make examples on about half these features, but if they don't actually like meet the same goal of the video, then it then means people will still not understand why they'll watch the video and still have no idea why they watched
Mhm.
it, right?
So then the document that you prepare, or maybe it's just something in your head, but the goal is, okay, you want to showcase a new feature after execution, and then you think of a good example, right? Like where exactly uh, how can I showcase this feature? Like, is it sending a Slack notification, maybe Telegram message or something like this, right?
Yeah.
And then you show how to exactly implement that. Is it right?
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things I like to make sure I do with the videos, especially when it's like a guide, is I don't like to cut corners. I like to make sure I show exactly from step one all the way to the end result. I find it very frustrating myself when I watch a technical
Yeah.
video on YouTube and they go, "Oh, just set up Google Cloud." And it's like, once you've got Google Cloud set up with all these things, and I'm like, I've never used whatever that is. Like, I don't know how to set it up. And I tried setting it up and it doesn't work. And it frustrates me, right? When I'm like, okay, the video's only showed me one bit, but I need to know from literally opening Google Cloud to connecting it to Python or whatever I was trying to do. So that's one of the key things is I like to try and avoid cutting corners, but at the same time, keeping a good pace because in the world of YouTube, good pace to the video is everything. If the video is too slow and a bit boring, people will tune off and then your video doesn't get recommended and it makes it hard for the video to do well. So like we've got an installation guide on how to install Kestra on Google Cloud, for example, and it's 15 minutes long, which is really nice. If I was looking to install something and I could see I could get the whole thing deployed in 15 minutes, you think, oh, that's not bad. But if there's an hour-long video to install in Google Cloud, you go, oh, I'm not even going to bother looking at the tool. It's just too overwhelming. Like
Mhm.
it's too much, right?
Maybe a last question before we wrap up. What are you working on right now?
Yeah, so we've started this new sort of Learn with Kestra series, which is all around demoing tools because Kestra works with so many different tools. Instead of trying to do videos specifically around Kestra, we're doing videos around these tools and then showcasing how Kestra can be a really useful tool for using that tool. So we did one on Docker recently on how what is Docker, why you might use Docker, and then we demonstrated how you can then run those containers with Kestra and you can use Kestra to automate that process. Same with Git. Now, those tools aren't maybe necessarily the best example of why you would use those with a workflow orchestrator, but I am planning to do one on Postgres soon, which is a great example, right? People want to be able to automate querying and loading data into a database. So I'm looking forward to. I haven't come up with the examples of that one yet, but I imagine they'll. I'm looking forward to that one because the examples will be a fantastic example of why an orchestrator is a good tool for the job. But it's more focused around. But the start of the video won't talk about Kestra, right? It will teach people why Postgres exists, why it's so popular, why people use it, right? Why was Postgres such a cool, trendy tool at the moment? And yeah, I'm hoping to expand that to other tools, talk about cloud platforms like Google Cloud, AWS, yeah, so far those have done quite well on the channel, which is good. People seem to really like them. And yeah, I'm also just looking for other tools. I've got one coming out soon on UV, which is a Python package manager,
Oh,
and
that's
about
a good one. Yeah.
yeah, it's like other like new things like that, which are mostly because I find it interesting, right? I want to go and play around with these tools and answer the question for myself: are these things just hype or are they actually useful? So it's sort of fun for me, but also fun for the viewers.
So I just went to YouTube and typed Kestra in the search box, pressed enter, and I see the channel Kestra. So if you want to see Will there talking about all these cool features, so you do the same thing and then you hit the subscribe button. I think they need more subscribers. So and then like the content that Will creates is awesome. You'll learn a lot by doing that. So do this. And maybe the last thing, I know we're kind of over time, but you left a note in the document, so I want to ask it. Like, do you have any um, recommendations, like books or other resources that you can recommend to the listeners?
Yeah. So when I was at the fellowship and I was helping to sort of manage a group of these student leaders who were running their groups, I found it very overwhelming. I didn't feel like I was giving them the support they needed, especially as I was still quite early in my career. And I didn't really have any experience. And someone recommended this book called Turn the Ship Around, which is all around basically it's like Navy chip where they had these leaders and different leadership styles, and it talks about basically how yeah, it's basically just really insightful on different leadership styles and how you don't, rather than people following commands, you want people to feel empowered to lead themselves, right? And everyone becomes a leader. And yeah, it's a really good read, and it really helped me empower my team. And after I read that book, the team really, the empowerment in the team was really good. People really enjoyed it, and people also did better jobs instead of feeling like they felt very open and honest with me about things that were working and things that weren't, because there was, no such wrong thing. I wanted people to just be open with me. And so, yeah, if you're finding yourself in a position where maybe you're not necessarily managing a team of people, but you're working with volunteers or, working with community members, it's a really good read. And I, yeah, totally recommend it if you're looking for how you can help to be a good leader or aspire to be a good leader one day.
That's amazing. Thank you. I hope you forgive me for keeping you 4 minutes longer.
No worries at
Uh,
all.
so thanks a lot, Will. It was amazing talking to you. Thanks for sharing all these stories. Thanks for sharing all these insights and giving me good recommendations too. Me personally, but I'm pretty sure that many of our listeners will find them useful too. And thanks everyone for joining in today. I hope you had as much fun as me. And yeah, thanks, Will. Thanks, everyone. And well, we'll see each other soon, I guess. So yeah, have a great day, everyone.